Song of Solomon, chapter 2, beginning at verse 8, reading to verse 9. The Shulamite, the young woman, says, "The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, he stands behind our wall. He's looking through the windows, gazing through the lattice." So, I mentioned to you in our introduction that the Song of Solomon can be divided into three sections. And the first portion or the first section could be divided into what is called the courtship. We call it, today we'd refer to the word dating. And then the second portion is the wedding itself. And then the last portion relates to marriage after the wedding. And so we're dividing it into those sections. And so we're looking from an American perspective. We're looking at these verses up to chapter 3. We're looking at the verses that relate to what we would today refer to as a dating kind of relationship. Let me begin by saying, in biblical times, dating and courtship were really non-existent. Marriages were arranged by fathers. Family lines and dowries were valued. But here in the United States, we Americans choose our mates. And the way that we do so is through the process of dating. Now, during the process of dating, what we're doing is we're gaining knowledge of the other person. We're determining whether we can or even want to take a relationship any deeper. Sometimes you may want to, but they don't. And so, after the initial attraction, there are things that begin to surface when you begin to date. So as you go out, you begin to see them for what they really are. And the fact is, when they become comfortable, the real person that you're dating begins to show up. Now, you go through various situations, and you notice how they react to pressure, for example. You notice how they act around your friends and your family. You notice how they spend money. You notice if they respect you, value you as a person. You begin to think about how you feel after you've spent time with them. You take into consideration how they speak to you and how they speak of you and how they treat you. You learn whether you can feel secure with them. You learn whether you feel comfortable with them. And you see whether you're in a relationship that is actually in the open, that other people are aware of. Because sometimes they may have someone on the side. And so when you're dating, you begin to discover whether it's really an exclusive relationship or not. As you're dating and growing to care for them, you will have a growing desire for a more intimate, a physical relationship eventually. And as that desire is awakened, as a believer, you keep it within proper boundaries. You see, the desire for intimacy is part of the way that we've been programmed, and marriage is a proper place for that kind of expression. Physical love is to be expressed, but in the confines of marriage. Like it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 8 and 9, when Paul said to the unmarried and the widows, I say, well, it's good for them to stay unmarried as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry. For it's better to marry than to burn with passion. And so as Christians, physical attraction, we understand is part of what moves us to get married. Now, this is something that this young woman, this Shulamite woman, is aware of. And because she's aware of that physical desire can begin to grow, she actually cautions her friends concerning it in Song of Solomon in chapter 2, verse 7. She says, "Do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases." So that infers that there are limits to physical expression. Now remember, God is the one who gave us the desires, if you will. It's programmed within us. God has given us the awareness of a need for physical or sexual intimacy. God has created the male and the female with the ability to need to be one flesh. And obviously there's nothing wrong with physical intimacy. God intended us to procreate. In Genesis 1:28 it says, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth, subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves around the ground or on the ground." So he created us with a particular purpose. He intended us to fill the earth with those who would love and worship Him. You see that in the last book of the Old Testament. In Malachi 2:15, where it says, He did not make them one, but did He not make them one, having a remnant of the Spirit? And why one? Because He seeks godly offspring. Now, when it says having a remnant of the Spirit, God had enough power, that's the reference to the remnant of the Spirit, to make several wives for Adam, but He only made one because He intended one man to be married to one woman for one lifetime. So the covenant of marriage is the best way to produce godly children. The family is to populate earth with people who love God and love one another. So sexual intimacy in and of itself is good. It's intended to be experienced. It's intended to be enjoyed. And because of this, God put boundaries on its practice and participation. And that's what the Shulamite is pointing out in verse 7 when she gives this word of caution. She says, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. Now, the word awaken means incite or arouse. Don't arouse this. Don't put yourself in a situation that stirs up sexual desire before marriage. You see, physical attraction and sexual desire are gifts from God, but are divinely ordained purpose, not for immediate gratification or selfish pleasure. The desire for physical intimacy is good because it is a God-given drive. It's a selfish drive to experience it before marriage that isn't good. So before marriage, it's not love that provokes us to experience physical intimacy. The Bible makes it clear that love is sacrificially concerned for other people. In 1 Corinthians 13:5, love does not demand its own way. And so you're not going to be pressured by somebody who actually loves you. So when someone is pressured into doing what they know is wrong, the Bible says it's sin. In James 4:17, remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. In Romans 14:23, everything that is not from faith, Paul said, is sin. So if you aren't married, here's a question for you. If you're not married, would you pray before intimacy and ask God to bless it? Would you say, God, we're about to fornicate. Will you bless this? If not, why not? It's because you know it's wrong. You see, the fact is, if someone loves you, they're only going to want what is best for you. And that's because love only desires what is best for the one they love. So in the Bible, sexual behavior is regulated. That's because it preserves what has been called the sacred meaning of physical intimacy. Intimacy outside of marriage is wrong. Why? Because it violates God's purpose. It undermines the meaning of what is called total union, the becoming of one flesh that God intended. But as is typical of human beings, we often wonder, how far can we go until we sin? So we have desires, so how physical can we be when we're dating? Well, if you ask that question, you may have already crossed the line. If you're wondering what limits you should live within, the answer is very basic. As Christians, we need to remember our bodies are the temples of the Holy Spirit. And we should know our weaknesses, and we should avoid compromising situations. The Bible in Romans 13, verse 14, says it like this: put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. So, my pastoral advice is very basic. Refrain from all forms of sexual intimacy. Refrain from prolonged kissing. Refrain from intimate caressing. Refrain from partial or total nudity. Incidentally, these are things I've been asked by people. And so I'm just telling you. Avoid immodest dress. Avoid explicit conversations. Avoid suggestive forms of media. Now, when dating, if they love you, they respect God's word, and they will respect your personal limits. This all falls under the category of things that you learn while dating. Now, eventually, if things are going deeper, you enter into what is called serious dating. That's when you only date one person, and that's when you date them with the intent of marriage. It's moving towards a formal engagement and ultimately getting married. So at that point, you begin to consider whether you can live with them over a lifetime. You begin to take greater notice of the way that they live. You take the time to see what their normal way of living is. And like I said earlier, the more comfortable they become with you, the more real they're going to be with you. And you begin to see them for what they really are. the dating mask comes off. Proverbs 20:11 says, even a child is known by his deeds, whether what he does is pure and right. You're known by what you're doing. Now, you may have met at church. At first, you were both regularly attending Bible studies and all, and you met them, you got attracted to them. But now that you're together, are you growing together? Are you growing in your walks with one another? Are you growing in your relationship with Jesus Christ? Remember, again, people remain pretty much the same person after they get married, and changes will take place over time. Maturity, both emotional and spiritual, can occur. But you need to remember, if there's no growth occurring while you're dating, there's not necessarily any growth that's going to happen later on. You see, some things are habits that can be broken. Other things are character deficits. And if your dating relationship is difficult, marriage will also be difficult. In 1 Corinthians 7:28, it says, those who marry will face many troubles in this life. Marriage responsibilities don't make you grow up. They produce pressures that reveal our immaturities and our deficiencies. And these times of pressure reveal a person's character as well as their faith in the Lord. Now, the Shulamite woman has made it clear that Solomon's the man for her. He's handsome, he's romantic, he's protective, he's openly committed, he's desirable. And that's what Marie says to me. He's the man of her dreams. And she can hardly wait to become his bride. Now, he makes it clear that he loves her, and he's sharing his desire to be together. And so in verse 8, it says, the voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, he stands behind our wall. He's looking through the windows, gazing through the lattice. The voice. When it says the voice of my beloved, the voice is to be understood as the sound. I looked it up in the original Hebrew. The word voice is really speaking of the sound, the noise. She's saying that she hears the sound of him as he's approaching. Now notice in verse 8, she hears him leaping and skipping. He leaps, he skips, then he stands behind a wall. He's looking and he's gazing. And this doesn't sound too manly to me. How many men here are leaping? Anyway, just saying. But he also sounds like a stalker. He's looking from behind the wall. I don't know. I'm not sure. What is this really revealing to us? Well, it reveals eagerness. He wants to be with her, and he just wants to see her. In spite of obstacles, it speaks about the mountains and the hills there. In spite of the obstacles, he has made his way to her, and that's what she's noticing. He's come to see me even though it hasn't been easy. Now, this may not sound like anything to you, but when I was growing up, and I didn't have lots of dates. I know you're surprised. I didn't have lots of dates. But the longest I was willing to drive to see a girl, 10 minutes. 15 at the most. Or maybe she can come see me. Which would be the better thing. But anyway, Marie lived in Ontario, and I lived in Norwalk. It was a 45-minute drive. And I didn't come skipping and leaping into her house, but I did drive. And it's talking about the obstacles. It's talking about the fact that he's willing to make some sacrifices just to be with her. And he wants to know everything about her. When it speaks about gazing and all of that, it's a picture of him studying her because he's interested in her as a person. He's got a tremendous interest. She's very attractive to her. And she's telling her friends. And she knows he loves her because he wants to get to know her. So when you decide this is the person you marry, there are things that should be happening. You should be deepening your communication slowly but consistently. And when you're moving towards marriage, the natural desire is going to be to know them better. But it takes wisdom. It takes wisdom. You need to know how much you can trust them, and trust takes time. Some people should not be trusted with too much personal information. So be very, very quick hold back. Don't share deeply personal things with anyone too quickly. You need to have the wisdom to know how much you can safely share. In John chapter 2, verse 25, Jesus had no need that anyone should testify of man because he knew what was in man. He didn't tell everybody everything. He spoke to his 12. He gave to them, he disclosed to them things that other people didn't generally get. In relationship, you need to have the wisdom to know that. Because one of the things that every man in this room knows, and many of you women, if not all of you, have learned, is when men begin to show an interest in a woman, very often it flatters the woman and she begins to disclose things and doesn't realize that what men are doing is a natural thing, is they're accumulating information, because what we're doing is we're studying. We are hunters. Others would say predators. We are pursuing, but in a way that women will not understand. Women are very social. We all know this. It's no stereotype. This is the truth. Somebody says, there you go, you conservative Christians, you always stereotype. Really? Okay, you're at a table. There are two couples, right? Two couples. And the woman turns to the other woman and says to her, I got to go to the bathroom. Want to go? And the woman says, oh, yes, let's go paddle our nose. And off they go, right? When's the last time you saw a guy turn to his buddy and say, I got to go to the head? Want to go? We don't do that. A woman walks into a bathroom and she may sit in a stall next to another woman. Oh, I like your shoes. I mean, they're different than men. We walk in, we don't even look at the other men. Am I wrong? We don't even look at the other men. We walk in, take care of business, and get out. Not women. It's kind of like a parade. Hey, we're going to the toilet. You know, that we're different. So women are quicker to disclose than men. What men do is we gather information. Tell me about your past. Tell me about your friends. Tell me about your hopes and your dreams. Why am I asking you that? Because I'm so interested? No, I'm gathering within the first hour or two, at the most, your weaknesses. I'm learning about you in a way that is really like a predator. I'm learning your weaknesses. I'm learning the things you want, because if I'm not an honorable man, I can use that against you. What kind of music do you like? Oh, I just love that old style country and western, that twangy, I got me a dog in a truck, I love that. And you go, a hot dog, so do I. When you hate it, when you don't like it. So whatever you like, we're going to like. It takes time. And after time, you begin to say, well, he said he likes this, but he's always changing it when it comes on. And that's how you discover us, right? That's the truth. This man, Solomon, is trustworthy. And he is really interested in her. He loves her. He's willing to make sacrifices to be with her. He's an honorable man. Be very careful that you don't share too much personal information. Be very careful that you're not quick to share deeply personal things with anyone, because we can learn someone's vulnerabilities by the things that they openly share with us. And remember, knowledge is power. The more I know, the more I control. And knowledge can be used as power and can be used in a hurtful as well as manipulative way. You see, if you get mad at one another, the things that have been disclosed are things that are used as word weapons later on. And the more you share, the more vulnerable you become. And the knowledge very often can be used to control and to hurt, to humiliate. By discovering your vulnerabilities, we can use them to exploit. And again, men are very good at that. So remember, it takes time to develop trust, but it only takes a moment to lose it. When you're moving towards marriage, you're going to reveal more of your heart. You're going to share about your life plans eventually. You're going to talk about whether or not you want to go to school, we'll say if you're young, where you want to live, and if you want children in the future, you'll tell your dreams. You may become vulnerable to the point where you begin to share things that you share with no one else. I call them secret talents. You may be a guy, there's not many who admit to this one, but you may be a guy who likes to write poetry. You may be that guy. There are guys who do. I was. when I was younger and all, when I met Marie, I would write her love songs. Not anymore. I don't need to. No, I I'm digging a hole, guys. So you may have a secret talent, your secret gift, something nobody knows you do or like to do. A lot of guys do. Me, I used to write. And I also, believe it or not, I used to sing. And I would sing to her. And she would sit there going, "Stop it." No, she would say, I was her living jukebox. She would say, "Can you sing this song for me?" And it made me feel like I actually could do that, right? But you don't do that with everyone. Not every one of you would do that. I'm not saying you should. What I'm saying is there are things you have that are your secrets that you begin to share with somebody else. Maybe your talent that you begin to share with this one. You trust them with this secret talent. They begin to know it, and you become vulnerable, and it becomes valuable, and it becomes something both of you enjoy together. Those are trust things. Those are things that take time to develop, and you're sharing all of these things. You begin to reveal your secrets, the things that hurt you. You begin to speak about the disappointments that you've had, your own fears. And that's part of learning to love, and trust is part of loving. Now, you don't want to necessarily be with someone who's always dumping their problems on you, because you're not going to be their boyfriend, girlfriend. You're going to be their therapist. Now, if you don't mind being that, that's between you, the Lord, and them. But be aware of that. Be aware if you're with somebody all the time who's never happy about anything, who's always complaining about something. Be aware if there's someone who's mad all the time. Be aware, because you end up marrying that and they don't change. And so you need to ask yourself, what should I really disclose, and how much should be disclosed? And the answer is a simple one: as much as the relationship requires. You don't need to talk about previous relationships. You don't need to name names and give dates and details. You don't need to know everything. And some things don't need to be known at all. So part of what I would advise, and again, I'm acting as an advisor for a moment, share what may ultimately come up later through someone else. Just be aware of that. Now, something I think is extremely important to know is, what is the direction that they feel led to go in for their life? Where do they want to live? How close to the in-laws do you expect to be? Where are you going to spend your holidays? Do you want kids? And why? Now, do you have kids you're bringing into marriage? And how is that going to work? As a man, do you expect your wife to cook? And can she? Do you want to eat? Have you balanced a checkbook? Do you have a budget? Are both of you planning to work? And if you do, whose money is it? You see, there are those who the man works and the woman works, and they have their own separate accounts. Have you talked about that? Now, in my case, having to make it personal for just a moment, Marie and I, when we first got married, my wife would work off and on for the first few years. And when the church was planted, when we planted Calvary Chapel, Ontario, Marie had to work. I didn't make very much. I was working as a landscaper. I was making $100 a week, and our fellowship was able to provide $100 a week. I had a house payment of $500 a month, just a house payment, which that's a bargain now, right? But at that time, I was only making a couple $100 a week, and I had 3 kids. And so Marie had to work. I never thought I was less of a man because my wife worked. We worked for each other. It was ours. It was us. And that's how it worked with us. And so Marie, actually, I was so blessed because she worked as a substitute teacher and she worked in Chino's school district. And she actually taught at Chino High School as a substitute, and some of the kids that were in her class back then actually started coming to the church. And Marie taught Spanish. And it was interesting because she didn't speak Spanish. Neither do her students, but she did her best. She did her best. And she provided finances for us, and we combined it. She was making a lot more than me. She was making twice as much as I was. And so it never was her money. It was never my money. It was simply our money. And so you need to be aware of those kinds of things. Where's it going to go with that? And so as we're looking at this, and it says again in verse 8, the voice of my beloved, behold, he comes leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle, a young stag. He stands behind our wall. He's looking through the windows, gazing through the lattice. He's anxious to be with me, and he's interested in me. My beloved spoke and said to me, rise up, my love, my fair one. Come away, for lo, the winter is past. The rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come. The voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth her green figs. The vines with the tender grapes give a good smell. Rise up, my love, my fair one. Come away. And so as we're looking at this, my beloved spoke, verse 10, said, rise up. Solomon is revealing he desires her only in an exclusive way. And leave everything behind that will keep you from being mine. In verse 11, the winter's past, the rain is over and gone. Winter is the season of clouds and gloominess, and that season is over. In relationships, there'll always be inevitable times of difficulty. Every day isn't always a beautiful day. But we learn from one another. We go through tough times together. Proverbs 27:17 says it like this, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. So you're going to go through the difficult seasons, and he refers to it. But then again, the flowers appear on the earth, and the time of singing has come. Those days are there, but they will pass. And times of blessing and joy can come. It's a picture of spring bringing an explosion of beauty. And in that, he's saying love can grow. There's going to be a growing desire to be with this person all the time. And when you finally marry, it's good to keep doing the things that kindled your love in the first place. Continue to attend your church. Continue to serve the Lord together. Continue to pray. Continue to fellowship with others. You know, my wife and I, again, using myself as an example, we spend hours together daily. We visit. We enjoy our lives. When we're able to, we'll take a getaway and all of that. When I was in Europe and Holland, we were just starting to really date. When I was in Europe, I had saved up for a year, and I used pretty much all of my savings. I backpacked with a friend of mine. I backpacked Europe for 3 months. And so, you know, I didn't have a lot of money in the bank. And I was using it to do the traveling. And I remember writing Marie, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I said, you know, I'll be honest with you, I am using all my money, and I'm not going to be able to take you anywhere when I get home. I was up front with her. Unless you work overtime, we're not going anywhere. Because it's our money. Remember, I told you that. It's our money. But anyway, so I wrote and I told her, I said, I won't be able to do that. Just know it. And she wrote back, I have the letter still, where she said, it doesn't matter. As long as we're together, that's all I want. And that's been true all the years of our relationship and marriage. It's been true from dating. You can do that. You can spend time as long as you got each other. Listen, when I go away and I come back and I come home, I'm not talking about coming to a house. When I go away and I come home, I'm talking about coming home to Marie. She is my home, no matter where we're at, right? Your husband, your wife, that is your home. It's not the house. That's where we live, right? And so for me, home has always been with the one I love. It's that simple. And so it doesn't matter as long as we're together. And that's the desire she has. She wants him. It doesn't matter as long as we're together. And so in verse 14, goes on to say, oh, my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the secret places of the cliff. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice. Your voice is sweet. That word sweet, when it says your voice is sweet, you're singing to me. Your face is lovely. Well, when he says, my dove in the clefts of the rock, a dove will roost in lofty cliffs or deep ravines. It's protected. It's avoiding the strife. So he's saying to the Shulamite woman, you're like a dove. You're mild in temperament and you're gentle. Now she's hearing Solomon approach, and she's withdrawing out of modesty, and she's hiding herself out of a sense of humility. After all, he's the king. But this is someone that she deeply loves, but he's also someone she deeply respects. And because of her modesty and because of her humility, Solomon desires her even more. Now, modesty is a personal awareness of who you truly are. Modesty is the fruit of purity. Modesty includes a sense of your own value. And modesty is known by self-control. The attitude of modesty, someone said, is difficult to maintain in a culture that prizes sexual permissiveness. Countless appeals for erotic satisfaction assail us daily from all the major forms of communication. This environment of indecency challenges all men and women of faith to choose and to witness to modesty as a way of life and as a method for healing a culture that has strayed from God's plan for sexuality and marriage. You see, a modest person rejects sinful sexual behavior, and a modest person does not entice. They make sure that the way they dress is appropriate. It's been said there are three things that will always tell you the truth: a young child, someone who's drunk, and yoga pants. Yep. I'm sorry. It's so stupid I had to say it. Forgive me. But you know, modesty really has been lost. I won't go into a long diatribe about that, but it truly is. You know, to think that pajamas are daily wear, come on. And all of that. And so modesty is something you protect. It's something you're aware of. Raising two girls into womanhood, Marie and I having two daughters, we would say to our girls, you know, make sure that you dress modestly. And the girls didn't understand because the culture that at school that they were being educated in didn't put a premium on modesty. And they actually thought that boys and girls were basically the same with just different body parts. And we had to tell them, no, you don't know boys. Boys see and girls don't necessarily. Boys use their eyes where girls think that they're just looking cute. And when the boy says, oh, you're cute, he isn't necessarily saying that she's cute like another woman would say. He's saying something a bit different. And you have to be aware, oh, Dad, you're so old-fashioned. No, I'm a man. And I know what men do. I know what men do because I am a man. I know I have to arrest my eyes. Like Job said, he said that he has trained his eyes not to look upon a young woman. Even Job, the most righteous man, said, I have to train myself in these things. Why? Because it's easy to be drawn. And so a woman of modesty is a great prize, is a virtuous woman. A modest person rejects sinful behavior and doesn't entice. That makes her what we call virtuous. And it makes her invaluable. In Proverbs 31, verse 10, the question is asked, who can find a virtuous wife? Her worth is far above rubies. And in Proverbs 31:30, it says, charm is deceitful, beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So that's what made her so valuable to such a great man. You see, a great woman has the effect of making a great man into a greater man. A good woman normally will rise to the level that the man allows her without quenching her. She'll rise to the level the man allows her to rise to, but a good man will rise to the level that she inspires him to. And so when you have a wife that inspires you, a wife that is a good woman, a virtuous woman, It makes you, as a man, want to be the kind of man that she'll look at and love forever. She inspires you. My wife inspires me. I've got a good wife, and she inspires me to be a good man. Why? Because she deserves a good man, and I want to be that man. And so that's how it worked with Solomon and the Shulamite. This woman admired him, and she loved him. It says in verse 15, catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. Catch us the little foxes. Fences would be built to protect vineyards from intruders, and the larger foxes would be kept out, but smaller ones would normally find a way to get in. And so guard yourself against anything that will destroy love from blossoming. And remember, it's usually the small things that add up to destroy relationships. And when you're unguarded in your relationship over the smaller things, danger exists. And if you don't address them, you can allow them to progress until it's too late. If I gave advice, I would say this to you. I would say, and this applies to dating and marriage, learn to forget former girlfriends or former boyfriends. Learn to forget them. The memories of that person are normally better than they actually were. First loves are often looked at as being the most intense and romanticized into being the very best. My brother-in-law, Robert, when Marie and I were first married, and I loved my brother-in-law, Robert, and Robert was talking to me on one occasion, and he brought up the name of a boyfriend of Marie's. And I didn't respond. I just kind of looked at him. And he said, and this again was many years ago, "You don't like hearing about her old boyfriends, do you?" I said, "No, not really." I said, "But you need to know something. There was nobody in her life before me." Now, that's not a fact. She had boyfriends and this and that. But I decided when she and I got together that I would make her love me so much. There would never be anybody that would take my place. That's what I did as a man. And I've done that all the years of our marriage. I will be her hero. I will be her number one love. I decided that, and I've done that. That's how it works. So I don't long for some old relationship, and she doesn't either. We have our own. And so that's been something that we've practiced. There's never been anyone but you. And if you remember anything, remember why you didn't stay with them. Don't look them up on social media. Don't ask people about them. Don't talk about them. That's the past. That's gone. That doesn't exist anymore. I have known people who got in touch with an old boyfriend and started an affair with them just by contacting them to see how you're doing. Stay away from that. Guard your relationship. Make sure that one that you're married to. Remember, when you got married, you probably said something, "I'll love you forever from, and until death do us part." Remember that? You didn't make that vow to that person. You made that vow to God. You said that to God. Before God and witnesses, "I will love you forever." And even though it may become difficult, and it will, and even though it'll be very hard sometimes, and it will, I'm gonna stay with you. And I will never long for something else, and I'll never want someone else. We're going to work this out together, and we're going to make it in the Lord Jesus Christ. Marie and I had the blessing of having parents who knew what love was and marriage commitment was. Both of our parents, before they went home to be with the Lord, before Marie's daddy went to be with Jesus, and my mom and my dad went to be with the Lord, both of our parents had marriages over 50 years. They were committed. They were committed to Christ eventually. My dad and mom didn't know Jesus until they'd been married 25 years. And my mom said one day to me, she said, "The first 25 years were good, but with Jesus, they've been great." See, so I was raised in that environment. When you say I do, I do. And that's not negotiable. We've never talked about divorce. She's wanted to kill me more than once, but we've never talked about divorce. That's not in our vocabulary. It's us forever. We've made a choice, and that choice is for you forever. And that's how it works. And that's what love can do. And so you need to remember, if anything, of an old flame of whatever, an old boyfriend, girlfriend, why did you break up? Maintain what first attracted you. Build on that foundation. You see, in verse 16, the Shulamite says, my beloved is mine. I'm his. He feeds his flock among the lilies. Until the day breaks, the shadows flee away. Turn, my beloved. Be like a gazelle, a young stag upon the mountains of Bether. So, when it says, my beloved is mine and I am his, and he feeds his flock among the lilies, this clearly reveals trust and commitment to just one man. And she has a deep sense of his commitment to her and her commitment to him. So if you want your relationship to last, don't provoke jealousy. Notice it says he feeds his flock among the lilies. What does that mean? He provides the very best for the ones that he loves, including her. He'll do the very best he can. My mama said, you know, your daddy will do anything for me. Anything. And she said, so I asked her daddy, I said, I want a Porsche. Daddy, will you? I want a Porsche. And she said, yeah. And then he went out and built her one. Did you get it? Yeah, we had a Porsche on the side of the house. Side Porsche. That's how my dad would say Porsche. Anyway, getting back to it. Let's see. Okay, for 17, we better close. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle, a young stag upon the mountains of Bether. This is a picture of her longing for Solomon to be with her as her husband. It's a picture of marital love. It's a desire that she has that's been awakened in her for him. She desires him and desires him to be intimate with her. When it speaks of the mountains of Bether and all of that, it's referring to physical attraction, and her desire is for him to be her husband. And again, she's longing for that relationship, which is a proper one. She's saying to him, I can hardly wait to be with you. I can hardly wait until we can consummate those things that marriage will allow us to consummate. And I love you with all of my heart, and I know that you love me too. So this desire has been awakened, but it's been fulfilled. It will be fulfilled in their marriage. And one last thing, one of the things as we've been going through Song of Solomon is we have people who have been in our fellowship without saying anything that is in any way judgmental, because it's not intended to be, who have heard what we're talking about here, and we're already performing marriages for people who've been living together. They're living together, they're hearing what God says, and they're saying, I want to be right with God. So this Bible study has already brought fruit in the kingdom of God, because people are hearing what marriage is, and they want that for themselves. So don't allow yourself to think that you're being judged for a relationship. Understand that God can do something if you open your heart to him.